All right, so good morning, everyone, and also to Team Malaysia. So, hello, guys. My name is Gab from the Philippine office, and I'm one of your colleagues as well. I hope you can hear me properly. So, let's have a quick daily briefing for today and just a quick recap on yesterday's data. Okay, so first thing is the inflation rate for UK for year-on-year basis for the month of May. So previous data was 1.5% and forecasted at 1.8%. And the release time yesterday, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And for year-on-year basis, the inflation rate for UK was 2.1%. So slightly higher than the forecasted, but it beats the previous data. Followed by the inflation rate for UK as well for month-on-month basis for the month of May. So previous data was 0.6% and forecasted at 0.3%. And for the month-on-month basis, the inflation rate for UK was 0.6%. So slightly higher than the forecasted, but the previous and actual data still unchanged at 0.6%. So to be specific, yesterday, after the release of the inflation rate for UK for the month-on-month and year-on-year basis, the GBP against the dollar had a modest gains around the 1.4 to 110 level. And after that, we have the building permits for US for the month of May. So previous data was 1.73 or 1.733 million and forecasted at 1.730. And the release time last night, 8:30 p.m. And for the month of May, the building permits for the US was 1.681 million. So lower than the forecasted, and it did not beat the previous data. Meanwhile, we also have the housing starts for US for US as well for the month of May. So previous data was 1.517 M and forecasted at 1.630 million. And for the month of May, the housing starts for US was seen around the 1.572 million. So lower than the forecasted, but it beats the previous data. Also, one of the key data last night is the inflation rate for Canada for the month-on-month basis for month of May as well. So previous data was 0.5% and forecasted at 0.4%. And for the month-on-month basis, the inflation rate for Canada was 0.5%. So slightly higher than the forecasted, but previous and actual data still unchanged at 0.5%. And the weekly crude oil inventories. So for the week, the previous data was negative 5.241 M per barrel and forecasted at negative 3.290 M per barrel. And for the weekly crude oil inventories, it was negative 7.355 million per barrel. So in particular, after the release of the US and Canada data, the effect for the USD CAD, as you can see last night, there's actually a choppy range around the 1.2180 level. But however, since there's an interest rate decision for the US last night, it affected the price of the USD CAD. And it went up towards the 1.2272 level. So economic data today. So during the US session last night, one of the main highlights of the data for the month of June is the Fed interest rate decision for the US. So previous data and forecasted, same thing at 0.25%. And the release time earlier, 2 a.m. in the morning. And for the month of June, the interest rate decision for US was still unchanged at 0.25%. Now, as you all know, it was a positive data. It was a positive effect for the dollar, as you can see here on the 30 minutes time frame on the dollar index. Now, despite of the government spending issues right now for the US dollar, but the interest rate decision helped the dollar to recover once again around the 91.30 level during the Asian session. So they've also reiterated that the effect of the current vaccinations had a strong policy support on the government, and it also led to a strength in the economic activity as well as the employment rate. So after the release of the interest rate decision, we can expect that the employment data and unemployment rate for the next few months might be a better comparing on the previous months. So that is why the effect for the dollar last night was on a bullish or positive tone, and a lot of currencies was actually affected after the release of this data. And during the Asian session, we have actually a key data as well for today. We have the GDP or the gross domestic product for the New Zealand for quarter on quarter basis. So our previous data was negative 1% and forecasted at 0.5%. And release time earlier, 6:45 a.m. So for the quarter on quarter basis, the GDP for New Zealand was 1.6%. So it beats the previous data and higher than the forecasted. So the effect of this data, since it's a good data for New Zealand dollar, the price of the NCD against the dollar in particular had a modest gains around the 0.7087 as of this moment during the Asian session. Also, we have employment change for Aussie, for Australia for the month of May. So previous data was negative 30.6K and forecasted at 30K. And for the month of May, the actual data was 115.2 thousand for the month of May, the employment rate or the employment change for the Australia. So 115.2K, this one is obviously way higher than the forecasted, and it beats the previous data. So of course, if the employment change data for the month of May is good, same goes with the unemployment rate. So for the unemployment rate for Australia, previous data was 5.5% and forecasted at same thing, 5.5. And for the month of May, it was better than the previous data. So it went down to 5.1%. So after the release, same goes with the NCD against the US dollar. In particular, during 30 minutes time frame, the Aussie dollar had a modest gains around the 0.7620 level. And aside from the Asian session, during the European session, we have to focus on the interest rate decision for Switzerland later at 3:30 p.m. Also, we have the inflation rate for Eurozone month on month and year on year basis for the month of May. In US session, we have the weekly initial jobless claims and the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index. And also, there's a speech later for Fed Chairman Janet Yellen later at 10 p.m. So we have to pay attention to that as well. So key products for today, first thing is the euro dollar. So after the release of the interest rate decision, the euro dollar did not benefit from it, obviously. So it went down sharply around the 1.1990 level. But to be specific, during the Asian session, we have the current price of the euro dollar is around the 1.9980 level. But however, since we have a data for the eurozone, the inflation rate, so if things are bad for the euro dollar, or if things are bad for the euro later on, so it may cause the euro dollar under pressure once again. So the possible support is 1.1945 and 1.1898, and for resistance 1.2088 and 1.2182 respectively. Next thing is dollar against the Swiss franc. The current price is 0.9084 during the Asian session. So this pair was actually benefited from the interest rate decision last night. So same thing, since we have interest rate decision for Switzerland. So if things are not good for or things are not bad with the Swiss franc later on, so it may limit the upside potential for the USD against the Swiss franc. But conversely, if it's bad data for the Swissy, so it may push the price of the US dollar against the Swiss franc higher within its range. So possible support is 0.9010 and 0.8935, and resistance 0.9124 and 0.9164 respectively. So again, during the European session, we have to pay attention on the interest rate decision for Switzerland later at 3:30 p.m. We also have the inflation rate for Eurozone month-on-month and year-on-year basis later at 5 p.m. And initial jobless claims for US and Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index and speech later on by Fed Chairman Yellen later at 10 p.m. So same thing, after the release of the interest rate decision, it doesn't mean that we don't need to be cautious when trading the dollar. So still, if you have a position that is paired with a dollar, especially by Swissy, Eurozone, since we have data, so please put a proper risk management and be cautious as well. All right, so I think that's it for me for today. Thank you everyone for attending the daily briefing. Please stay safe and have a great day.